back in April, there was a movie that came out that I was pretty certain is a Hulu original. It's called Quasi, or Quasi, actually. Yeah, it's Quasi. I don't know why I said Quasi. But it's by a group that's probably one of my favorite comedy troupes that's kind of out there and have been going like strong for at least the last 20 or 30 years. And it's by Broken Lizard. It's their most recent film. And for those who aren't really attuned to what Broken Lizard or who Broken Lizard is, I'm pretty sure everybody has seen or heard of the movie Super Troopers or possibly Beer Fest. Those are their two biggest films that are out there. They have a bunch more that may or may not be hits with a lot of people. Club Dread, The Slam and Salmon, one of my personal favorites. Again, Super Troopers. They also have Super Troopers 2, which, funny enough, is their only sequel that they've ever really done. They haven't really done sequels to any of their movies. Super Troopers is the only one. So it's kind of interesting to really look at this group and look at their sort of filmography and see like what they have done, because there's a lot that's under their name and a lot that everybody knows is kind of what they do. It's almost like what Adam Sandler does with Happy Madison Productions. These guys have been doing since the late 90s already, like right around that time when Adam Sandler was also doing it and trying to get out of the limelight and produce his own stuff. Not limelight like in terms of popularity, but limelight of, having somebody else being the producers and the money people, the writers, the people who had the most say over their content. Broken Lizard has been doing that for just as long. They don't have as many movies under their belt, but the ones they do, they're really, really good. And then where does their most recent one fit into that? Let's kind of go into their history a little bit first. I wanted to do a kind of full-on Broken Lizard entry to kind of cover everything they've done up to this point, including Quasi, and then in the future when they release more movies, if they release more movies, because it's been a while. They usually have long gaps between their movies, surprisingly enough. It's kind of upsetting for somebody like me who is a really big fan and has pretty much watched everything except for their very first film. Now, the very first film they did, I think it was like 96 or 98. It's called Puddle Cruiser. I don't know what it's about. All I know is I remember going on a big Broken Lizard binge around the time of, I want to say, The Slam and Salmon. And I was just grabbing up everything that I could of these guys. And I was just trying to watch it all. And most of it I had already seen. But it was like I just wanted to have it all in my collection. And Puddle Cruiser came floating around because it's their first film ever. It's the first one they ever did. It was a straight to, I think, DVD release. Very few people know about it. It only cost like 50 grand to make the thing. And it's written, directed, all by Broken Lizard, and specifically I'm going to butcher his last name. Jay Chandran Senskar. I'm pretty certain that's how you say it. Maybe it's Chandran Senskar. It's very long, and it's just super confusing to say, so forgive me if I am butchering it. But he does most of the directing for their films, including this first one, Puddle Cruiser. I really don't even know the premise of it. I don't know what it's at all about. I should eventually sit down and watch it. It just hasn't been on my radar. When I sit down and I want a Broken Lizard movie, my go-to is usually the Slam and Salmon. And that doesn't come till another 10 years later. So right after that, it's the hit that really put them on the map. It's 2001 Super Troopers. That is a fantastic movie. Super Troopers from start to finish is just one of the best films that they probably have ever done, which is more than likely the reason why 15 to 20 years later they did a sequel for it, which wasn't as good. It's not the same as like how sometimes you feel a sequel in a comedy genre is just redoing the same jokes. They did redo a lot of the jokes, but there's still something about it that doesn't have the same feel in the sequel from 2018. But the first one, tremendous. It's just a tremendous feat in not just writing, but to really like come out the gate with something that's that big for what Super Troopers was, how big it was for just Broken Lizard as a team. I think it cost them like $1 million to make, and it made like 30 in its box office run, which is big for a comedy film of that era. We're talking 2001-ish. $30 million in today's money is the equivalent of, I think, like $57 million, which is pretty big when you consider it cost $1 million to make. Granted, in today's money, that would be more than likely closer to $3 million. It's still a huge profit margin that really goes to show, hey, this is a movie that is so good, it's putting us on the map, and there's no way to go but up. But this is also when you start to notice that they have huge gaps in their movies, which really sucks. Because if you're talking about guys that release movies like Adam Sandler does, where it's almost 1 or 2 a year sometimes, these guys don't do that. Their next film doesn't come out until like 2004, which is a hit or miss with a lot of people, and it's Club Dread. It's kind of what like the Wayans brothers was doing with the Scary Movie movies, so it's kind of like this play on a goofy horror slasher kind of thing with all of these guys and a lot of really wacky jokes revolving around it. It didn't do well. I enjoy it. I think it has a lot of quirkiness to it that like lets me go back to it and really find enjoyment out of it. But it is not my go-to Broken Lizard film, and it's kind of the one that's at the bottom of the barrel, probably not just for me, but for a lot of people. And that's coming from somebody who has not seen Puddle Cruiser, and they don't promote that shit anywhere. Now, after that, there's another Broken Lizard film a little bit sooner, but there's also a film in between those two that isn't really a Broken Lizard film, but it's just a film that they had a lot to go off of because Jay Chandrasekhar, again butchering his name completely, he directed the film The Dukes of Hazzard from 2005 with Johnny Knoxville and Sean William Scott. So he directs it, and there's also a bunch of cameos from the other Broken Lizard guys throughout the film. They play these little roles here and there, along with Willie Nelson, Burt Reynolds, Jessica Simpson. Everybody remembers the 2005 Dukes of Hazzard. So they have a role in that, but it's not really 100% their film. But it is listed as being part of theirs because it's part of Jay Chandrasekhar's directorial history. It's one of his films, essentially. And if it's anything that has to do with him, it sort of has to do with the whole group. And then right after that, they tee it off again with probably my second favorite film, Beer Fest from 2006. That film does pretty successful, not as good as Super Troopers does, but it's another really good film that comes out of the gates for them that's exactly their style. It's 100% a great successor to a story like Super Troopers. It's complete nonsense. It has so much ridiculousness wrapped around it that it's just it really stamps what Broken Lizard is about and what their comedy is about, and it's either you're here for it or you're not here for it. Now this is right at this point their third film in their history of being filmmakers and being this comedy troupe that does this kind of stuff. So when you're talking about Super Troopers, Club Dread, and Beer Fest being big names that a lot of people probably know right off the bat, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. And then, again, we're looking at another huge gap between that film and the next film, which is my personal favorite, the one I go to the most over Super Troopers, over Beer Fest, and that's the Slammin' Salmon. Now, the Slammin' Salmon doesn't go into theaters. You don't really have a lot of information that you can find about its budget or what it made in the box office, because it kind of just went through a film festival and then was released to the world. And then after it gets released to the world, I also believe it's the first one that's directed by Kevin Heffernan, who is another member of the Broken Lizard team, and he also plays a big role in this film where he's sort of the main focus in a way. He's the manager of the restaurant the Slammin' Salmon is based in, and of course everybody else plays waiters and cooks, and it's got Michael Clark Duncan in it. It's got what's this girl's name? I forget her name. From How I Met Your Mother. She plays in... what's her name? It's the girl from How I Met Your Mother who's also in the Marvel universe. She plays the agent that's really close with Nick Fury. I can't think of the actress's name off the top of my head right now, and it's gonna bother me. And I'll probably say it somewhere towards the end of this when it really comes to me. It's gonna hit me in the face and it's gonna be really annoying. But she's in it, and it's not the greatest story in the world, but it is really my favorite of all the stories they've written. The premise of the Slammin' Salmon is you have this restaurant that's run by Michael Clark Duncan, who in this universe is this retired boxer. So he's kind of like a Mike Tyson, like nobody wants to mess with him kind of deal. And so he owns this restaurant that's mostly a seafood restaurant that also serves some other little dishes here and there, but his specialty is meant to be seafood. The restaurant's name is called the Slammin' Salmon. Now what happens is, as the owner, Michael Clark Duncan's character gets into deep water with like some other like Chinese business owners, and he has to give them like $10,000 because he loses a bet. So he's gonna take it from the money he makes on that night. It all takes place on one dinner service. So in that dinner service, he puts Kevin Heffernan's character, the manager of the restaurant, to the task of making sure the waiters push the dishes that are most expensive so they can get the money and he can pay off the debt. But now he's got to try to make up games and whatnot to get the waiters to do it and kind of make them feel like they're also part of it, so they sell as much as they can and make 10 grand in one night. Which, you know, you would think making 10 grand in one night for a seafood restaurant, not too out there, but it is just a funny bit of antics that happen throughout it when you see like the waiters and the waitresses kind of fighting over it, making these deals. You see all their personalities and all their characters come out in different ways. It's such a fun movie to watch, and maybe I'm just not explaining its premise to the best of my ability because I'm trying to go through all of their movies in a certain amount of time. But the Beer Fest is good. Super Troopers is good. Slammin' Salmon is one of my favorite. And then we don't get another straight-up Broken Lizards movie until 2018's Super Troopers 2. But they are doing things in the middle of that. For example, there's a movie that's called Freeloaders that comes out sometime around 2012 that is produced by them, and a bunch of the Broken Lizard people are in the film, but nobody has anything to do with it. It's not written by them. It's not directed by anybody. They're just kind of there. They're kind of in it in a way. And then you have the Baby Makers, which also came out around the same time, which was produced and directed by Jay Sandreskar, and that's about it. I don't think it's got anybody else from the troupe in it, really. Maybe one or two of them, if I remember correctly. Baby Makers is a fun film, but it's also not a Broken Lizards movie. So literally between the Slammin' Salmon in 2009, nothing happens for 10 years. And then you get Super Troopers 2. Now, Super Troopers 2 comes out, and, you know, it's a hit or miss for some people. You know, I'm not a person who's going to say I didn't like it. I'm a person who's going to say that out of all the movies for there to be a sequel, I'm still waiting for the sequel to Beer Fest, which was supposed to be Pot Fest. I'm guessing maybe they couldn't write a good enough script for that. I don't know. I don't mind the idea of a Super Troopers 2. It is enjoyable. But if I'm going to sit down and watch a Super Troopers, I'm watching 1 and I'm going to ignore 2. That's my personal opinion. Again, not saying that it's bad. I will watch it if it comes on. I will not go out of my way to watch it. Especially if you're considering that if you're going to ask me, what would you watch, Super Troopers 2 or Super Troopers, I'm picking regular Super Troopers any day of the week. It's probably like the better of the two in my opinion, because, you know, this just looks like they're like grasping at straws, because I guess they're not writing anything unique anymore. Because even then, after 2018 Super Troopers 2, we don't get anything until now. 5 years later, sometime back in April, released on Hulu, is Quasi, which is essentially a parody and like this funny take on the story of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Directed by Kevin Heffernan, written by the Broken Lizard team, and starring all of them with a bunch of other famous people. It is a lot of fun. It is enjoyable to watch. It is not their best work, but it's also understandable how this went straight to streaming as a Hulu original. And it's also not, it's just a parody. Like, if they wanted to do this and this be a starting point, I would love it if they did it for every movie that they can get the rights to for that. Like if you're able to get the rights, like something like Quasimodo and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, if you're able to get those rights and do a movie like this, I better now see a string of these get released. I want to see a Broken Lizard, like a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, done by the Broken Lizard. I want to see Bambi done by the Broken Lizard. I want there to be more to this, because if you're no longer going to do the stuff you've written, which you write great scripts and you have a tremendous comedy like type that it appeals to somebody like me, and it appeals to a lot of people because you do have a huge following as Broken Lizard. And if you make this turn like this, where it's no longer a unique story in any way, you better be prepared to do more. And I'm here for more. If you're saying that next year you're going to come out and it's going to be Broken Lizard's Aladdin, where it's more based on, Agrabah and the 40 Thieves, I'm here for it. Give me that film. Give me a bunch of those films. I'll watch them every day of the week, especially if they're Hulu originals. But it is kind of upsetting when you think of this trail they've gone down and how really good and unique a lot of their movies are. Like, they're really unique storylines that, even if they're writing it as a parody of something, it's not of directness towards anything. Slammin' Salmon, it's a restaurant film. It's making fun of the restaurant industry. Super Troopers is making fun of, cops and highway patrolmen. Club Dread is making fun of horror movies in general. It's not unique. It's been done by a million other people. Even their not so much movies, Freeloaders, about roommates, Baby Makers, about a couple who's struggling with a certain aspect that they make a comedy out of. Beer Fest, this idea of beer being an Olympic sport, or beer drinking being an Olympic sport. It's all amazing. And then here you have Quasi, that's a parody of a story that's already out there. So you're making jokes wrapped around an already done concept, which, I've said it already, but if you're willing to do that, I want you to go full steam ahead and give me more. I will literally pay, not even just for Hulu. I want to see it in a movie theater. I want to see the next Broken Lizard film. I want it to be like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, but it's done by Broken Lizard. I think that would be hilarious. I want to see, what's the movie that just came out? Little Mermaid. I want to see Broken Lizard's Little Mermaid. I would go and watch that 1,000 times over. If this is the route you're going to be going down, I want you to go full steam ahead and break all the walls down and give us this ridiculous string of parody films following and starting with Quasi. I'm fully there for it. But I also wouldn't mind Potfest, to be honest with you.